Eleanor Whitmore was 72 years old when the world decided she no longer mattered. She lived in a small, fading house on the edge of Maplewood, Ohio, a town that once knew her name, her kindness, her strength. Now, it barely remembered her existence. The white paint on her porch had peeled away like old scars, and the oak tree in her front yard had grown wild, its branches leaning as if even nature felt tired with age. Every morning, Eleanor woke up before sunrise. Not because she had somewhere to go, but because sleep no longer stayed with her. Memories always arrived first. She would sit at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, her hands trembling slightly, not from weakness, but from everything she had lost. Once, Eleanor Whitmore had been a respected woman. A schoolteacher for over 30 years. A wife. A mother. A pillar of her community. And then, one by one, those titles were stripped away. Her husband, Robert Whitmore, died 15 years earlier from a sudden heart attack. He collapsed in their living room while fixing an old radio. Eleanor held his head in her lap until the ambulance arrived too late. After that day, silence became her closest companion. Her son, Daniel Whitmore, was all she had left. She raised him with discipline and love. Paid for his education. Sold her jewelry to cover his college tuition. Worked extra years just so he could have a better life. And he did. But not with her in it. Daniel married Melissa, a woman who smiled politely at Eleanor but never hid her disgust behind closed doors. To Melissa, Eleanor was not family, she was a burden. An old woman taking up space, breathing money, and waiting to die. At first, Daniel visited often. Sunday dinners. Holiday calls. But then the visits grew shorter. The calls became rare. And eventually, they stopped altogether. Until the day Daniel returned not as a son, but as a stranger. "Mom, we need to talk." Daniel stood in Eleanor's living room, avoiding her eyes. He was well dressed, confident, successful. Everything she had sacrificed for. Eleanor smiled softly. "You look tired, sweetheart. Sit. I'll make tea." "No, Mom. This one tea take long." Those words cut deeper than he realized. Daniel cleared his throat. "Melissa and we think it's time you moved." Eleanor froze. "Moved?" she repeated quietly. "Yes. Somewhere more suitable. Assisted living. A care home." Her hands tightened around the edge of the chair. "This is my home, Daniel. Your father built this house." "I know, but things are different now," he said quickly. "You're old. Alone. It's not safe." The lie sat between them like poison. "I don't need care," Eleanor whispered. "I need my son." Daniel sighed, frustration flashing across his face. "You're being selfish." Selfish. The word echoed in her mind. 2 weeks later, papers arrived. Legal papers. Her house sold. Her savings transferred. Her signature forged. Daniel had power of attorney, something Eleanor had signed years ago without question, trusting her child completely. That trust destroyed her. Eleanor was taken to Silver Pines assisted living facility against her will. Her protests were ignored. Her tears dismissed. "Mom, this is for your own good," Daniel said, not meeting her eyes. Melissa stood beside him, arms crossed, victorious. Silver Pines smelled like disinfectant and despair. Old people sat in wheelchairs staring at walls, forgotten by families who had moved on. Eleanor was given a small room. One bed. One window. One cracked mirror that reflected a woman she barely recognized. The nurses were indifferent. The staff underpaid. Kindness was rare. Days passed. Then weeks. No visits. No calls. On Eleanor's 73rd birthday, she sat alone while a nurse placed a small cupcake on her tray. "Happy birthday," the nurse muttered, already walking away. That night, Eleanor cried for the first time since her husband died. But something else was born in that darkness. Not weakness. Awareness. One evening, Eleanor overheard two nurses talking outside her room. "Room 214," one whispered. "She used to be rich." "Yeah," the other laughed. "Her son cleaned her out." "Happens all the time." Something snapped inside Eleanor. The next morning, she asked for a social worker. Then a lawyer. They laughed. "No one will believe you," one nurse said. "You're old. Be grateful your family put you somewhere safe." Safe. Eleanor looked around at the cracked walls, the ignored cries, the loneliness. She realized something terrifying. This place was not meant to protect people like her. It was meant to hide them. And Daniel had hidden her well. One night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the distant coughs and moans of forgotten souls. Then she remembered something. A name. Margaret Hale. Her former student. Now a journalist. Eleanor smiled faintly for the first time in years. They thought she was powerless. They thought age had erased her mind. They were wrong. Very wrong. Eleanor Whitmore learned very quickly that survival inside Silver Pines required silence. Not the peaceful kind but the strategic kind. She stopped asking questions. She stopped complaining about cold food or missed medication. She lowered her eyes when nurses passed and spoke only when spoken to. To everyone watching, Eleanor became exactly what they expected her to be, a confused, fragile old woman slowly fading away. But inside her mind, everything was sharp. Every word. Every face. Every lie. The head nurse, Carla Simmons, noted Eleanor's change with satisfaction. "She's finally settling in," Carla said during a staff meeting. "Less trouble now." Eleanor overheard that too. She began pretending to forget things, names, dates, even her own room number. When staff ignored her calls, she waited patiently. When meals were late, she smiled politely. They stopped seeing her as a threat. That was her advantage. At night, when the hallway lights dimmed and the building fell into restless silence, Eleanor exercised her memory. She replayed her entire life like a courtroom exhibit: dates, documents, signatures, bank accounts, conversations. She remembered exactly where Daniel had slipped. And she remembered something else he had forgotten. Years ago, after Robert's death, Eleanor had placed important documents in a safety deposit box not under Daniel's name. Robert had insisted. "Trust people," he had told her, "but never give them everything." The box contained copies of property deeds, handwritten notes, old bank statements and one crucial thing, a recorded voicemail. Daniel's voice. From 2 years ago. "Mom, I need you to sign this quickly," he said nervously in the recording. "It's just temporary. Don't read it, it's legal stuff. I'll explain later." Eleanor's heart pounded just remembering it. That voicemail alone could destroy him. But she needed access. And she needed help. Margaret Hale had once been a shy, awkward teenager sitting in Eleanor's English class. Eleanor had encouraged her writing. told her stories mattered. Margaret had become an investigative journalist in Chicago famous for exposing elder abuse and corporate corruption. Eleanor had followed her career quietly. Proudly. Now, she needed her. Silver Pines limited phone access, but Eleanor noticed something most residents didn't. The night security guard, Tom, was lonely and kind. She struck up conversations. Asked about his children. Remembered his birthday. One night, she said softly, "Tom, could you help me make a call, just one?" He hesitated. Then nodded. Margaret answered on the third ring. "Hello." "Margaret," Eleanor whispered. "It's Mrs. Whitmore." Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. "Mrs. Whitmore, oh my God, are you okay?" Eleanor closed her eyes. "No. And I need your help." She told Margaret everything. The forged papers. The stolen house. The abandonment. Silver Pines. By the end of the call, Margaret was quiet. Then she said something Eleanor would never forget. "If this is true," Margaret said slowly, "they're finished." Over the next few weeks, Margaret worked discreetly. She contacted elder law attorneys, financial crime specialists, a former prosecutor who owed her a favor. They confirmed what Eleanor already suspected: Daniel hadn't just betrayed her. He had committed multiple felonies. Forgery. Financial exploitation of an elder. Fraud. But there was a problem. "He controls the narrative," the lawyer said. "Right now, you're legally incompetent in the system." Eleanor smiled faintly. "Then we change the system." Margaret arranged a wellness review through a state agency routine, unexpected. An evaluator arrived at Silver Pines one morning. Eleanor performed perfectly. She answered questions calmly. Accurately. She remembered dates, names, current events. The evaluator frowned. "This woman is not cognitively impaired," she told Carla later. Carla's smile faded. 2 days later, Eleanor was given her phone privileges back. Progress. Daniel visited for the first time in over a year. He walked into Eleanor's room with fake concern plastered across his face. "Mom," he said gently. "You look thinner." Eleanor looked up slowly, eyes watery, voice trembling. "Danny," she whispered. "Is that you?" Relief washed over his face. "Yes, Mom. It's me." She reached for his hand, weak, shaking. "I miss you," she said. "I don't understand why I'm here." Daniel squeezed her hand, guilt flickering for just a second. Then it disappeared. "This is best for you," he said firmly. Eleanor nodded obediently. Inside, she memorized everything. His watch. His confidence. His lies. As he stood to leave, she whispered, "I trust you." Daniel smiled. That smile would haunt him. Margaret's editor approved the investigation. They kept it quiet. Too quiet for Daniel to notice.